Deep in the arid heart of Iran, where the Halil River winds through a scorched basin, the earth held its breath for 5,000 years. A flash flood came without warning in the year 2000, tearing through the valley and peeling back the skin of the present. When the waters finally receded, the locals stumbled upon something that should not have been there. Ancient pottery, intricate stone vessels, and glints of lapis lazuli emerged from the mud like forgotten whispers from the deep. You could almost hear the silence that followed. A heavy, stunned silence before the looting began. Word spread faster than the floodwaters, and soon the valley became a frantic, secret marketplace of the dead. Tomb raiders descended in the night, digging with shovels and bare hands, chasing the ghosts of an unknown civilization. Before any scholar could set foot there, the heart of the Jiroft culture was being sold piece by piece to the highest bidders. This was not merely a grave. It was an entire city, a metropolis that had no name in any history book. What the thieves pulled from the silt challenged the very foundation of how we understand the dawn of human urban life. We tell ourselves that civilization was born in the well-mapped river valleys of Mesopotamia and the Nile. But Jiroft painted a different, unsettling mural. Here was a complex society, flourishing in eastern Iran, crafting art and architecture with a sophistication that rivaled Sumer itself. And yet, for decades, the global narrative of history had somehow erased it entirely. That erasure, whether by neglect, politics, or academic inertia, became a mystery as deep as the ruins themselves. The suppressed civilization had finally clawed its way back into the light, and it was not going quietly. To truly grasp the anomaly, you must first picture the landscape. A vast, shimmering plain guarded by rugged mountains, once crisscrossed by waterways that have long since vanished into dust. Here, along the Halil Rud, the south wind carries the scent of scorched earth and the faint metallic tang of ancient copper. The central mound, known locally as Konar Sandal, rises from the flatness like a weathered ziggurat, a mud brick titan that has partially melted back into the terrain. Archaeologists who later arrived found structural ruins on a scale that suggested a major administrative or religious hub, a citadel, watching over a forgotten kingdom. The surrounding area stretched for kilometers, littered with the footprints of smaller settlements, workshops, and extensive irrigation canals. This was no isolated outpost. It was a thriving economic and cultural engine that had simply been switched off by time. The most eloquent witnesses to its grandeur were the chlorite vessels, dark stone containers carved with a precision that felt almost impossible for such an early era. The iconography on those vessels tells a story more vivid than any cuneiform tablet, a pantheon of hybrid beasts, men grappling with serpents, and complex water flows framed by ornate palm fronds. These are not primitive doodles. They represent a highly codified system of myth and power, a visual language we still struggle to translate. For a moment, imagine the artisan's hand guided by torchlight, grinding and polishing the soft stone for weeks to perfect a single drinking vessel for a king who left no written name. Many of the looted carvings quickly surfaced in the shadowy corners of the international antiquities market, sparking a furious debate among experts. Some argued the style was a mere provincial echo of Mesopotamian art, a derivative offshoot of the great Sumerian experiment. But those who held the physical objects in their hands noticed something profoundly unnerving. The artistic grammar was distinct, original, and ferociously complex. Figures moved with a dynamic energy unknown in the rigid friezes of Ur, a sense of raw, untamed narrative that suggested a separate genesis of genius. Lead archaeologist Youssef Majidzadeh and his team soon proposed a radical, almost heretical hypothesis. This was not just a new site, but a lost cradle of equal stature. They pointed to the handbag motifs carried by the gods in Jiroft art, a symbol that mysteriously echoes across unrelated ancient cultures from Göbekli Tepe to Mesoamerica. The theory sent tremors through the academic establishment, as if the map of the ancient world was a fragile jigsaw puzzle suddenly shaken by a seismic hand. Where did these people come from, and why does no surviving epic, neither Sumerian nor Akkadian, clearly name their mighty city? The stratigraphy insisted that the city had been abruptly abandoned, not by slow decay, but in a cataclysmic fire that scorched the walls and buried the last treasures under collapsed roofs. That layer of ash is a time capsule of violence, a scream frozen in carbonized wood and shattered, heat-cracked stone. Among the ruins, scribes' tools were found, clay tokens and seal impressions, hinting at a sophisticated administrative system for tracking trade goods like carnelian and blue lapis. The seals sported strange geometric motifs, distinct from the cylinder seals of Sumer, proving that a unique bureaucratic identity guarded the storerooms of Jiroft. The city clings to its anonymity as fiercely as the desert sand clings to its secrets. Where the spade failed to provide a name, desperate historical speculation rushed into the vacuum, weaving a labyrinth of competing identities. The most romantic theory links Jiroft to the fabled kingdom of Arata, a mythical adversary of Sumer described in the oldest epics as a glittering jewel of wealth and craft. In the Sumerian poem, Enmerkar and the Lord of Arata, the sorcerer king of Uruk wages a contest of wits against a distant eastern ruler to acquire gold and silver for a temple. The poem describes a mountain route, 7 gates, and a land rich in colored stones, a geographic riddle that leads the mind directly to the highlands of Kerman. If Jiroft is Arata, then the literature of the world's first urban civilization was not just mythologizing a barbarian frontier, but negotiating with a technological peer. That would mean the cradle of civilization was actually a twin birth, a competition of equals, separated by the harsh barrier of the Zagros Mountains. A more cautious, yet equally profound, hypothesis repositions Jiroft as a central trading nexus, a forgotten Switzerland of the Bronze Age that connected the Indus Valley to the Tigris. The sheer volume of imported lapis lazuli from Badakhshan and copper from the mountains implies a control over long-distance supply chains that reshaped the region's economy. But political shadows fall heavily over this labyrinth of theories, and the phrase suppressed civilization begins to take on a heavier, more cynical weight. International archaeological collaboration faced formidable barriers due to geopolitical tensions, diplomatic isolation, and the slow grinding machinery of sanctions. Consequently, the critical mass of peer-reviewed fieldwork that typically elevates a discovery to global fame remained stubbornly incomplete, leaving the story to be told in fragments. Some whispers suggest a darker, more localized suppression, a fear within Iran itself of pre-Islamic heritage overshadowing certain modern narratives. That internal cultural friction, combined with the external academic skepticism, created a perfect storm of silence around the ancient city on the mound. The artifacts offered answers, but the soil beneath them whispered a different story. A story of complex power struggles that may have intentionally buried the truth. You find yourself standing at the edge of a strange paradox. A lost civilization that we know existed, can hold in our hands, yet cannot fully introduce to the world. There is a comfort in believing history is a solved puzzle, until you look upon the ziggurat of Konar Sandal and realize a whole kingdom can slip through the cracks of our certainty. Separating hard fact from desperate speculation here becomes a delicate act of intellectual survival. We know for certain that a highly advanced urban population sculpted these stones, managed these waters, and prayed to these hybrid gods. Everything else is an educated whisper, an echo in a canyon of time where the original shout has long since faded to myth. Some say the lack of a decipherable name is proof of its provincial status, a footnote, not a chapter. Others counter that the quality of the chlorite is so exceptional that it outshines the royal graves of Ur, demanding a rewrite of artistic evolution. The academic fight over Jiroft is, in essence, a battle over where humanity chooses to locate its ancestral pride. We are desperate to know if the roots of our global story are primarily Mesopotamian, or if the tree splits into equally ancient, hidden branches deep in the Asian continent. That quest has turned the valley into a strange pilgrimage site for obsessive archaeologists, like a Grail quest, where the Grail is a single unbroken clay tablet bearing a city's title. The desert plays its own game of concealment, swallowing markers and shifting sands over unexcavated grids that might hold the answers we seek. Weather and time are the ultimate censors, their slow erosion a far more effective suppression than any political decree could ever be. And so the labyrinth stands, a towering silent library of mud and ash, with its door slightly ajar but its index completely burned to nothing. The human obsession fuels this mystery. It is a fire stoked by the face of a chlorite goddess staring back at you from across 50 centuries. Consider the local villagers who first held those divine stone faces in their calloused hands, realizing instantly that they were clutching the soul of an ancestor they never knew. Fear and reverence mixed with poverty, and many were torn between the instinct to protect the dead and the urgent need to survive. Then came the archaeologists, driven men like Majidzada, who saw in the vandalized trenches not a crime scene, but a desperate patient needing resuscitation. They worked under a blistering sun that reaches 50 degrees, a heat that fuses sweat and dust into a second skin, cleaning brushes moving as gently as a surgeon's instrument. Every night in the camp, illuminated by a sputtering generator, the fragments were pieced together. A ceramic puzzle promising a glimpse of a world just out of reach. The psychological toll is immense. To hold the tangible evidence of an autonomous, brilliant civilization and yet fail to convince the world of its rightful place. You can imagine the maddening silence of the artifact shelves in Tehran, where masterpieces wait for foreign visas that diplomatic tempests will never grant them. This is the grief of the archaeologist, not the loss of a treasure, but the loss of a story, a narrative that could illuminate how deeply interconnected our ancient world truly was. Obsession can twist into melancholy when you stand atop the central citadel mound at sunset, watching the long purple shadows creep across a city that refuses to speak its name. The wind moans through the gaps in the excavated walls, a low, resonant frequency that sounds almost like a morning hymn for a forgotten people. We project our own fears of anonymity onto Jiroft, terrified that a culture so magnificent could simply vanish from the collective memory of our species. If they could be forgotten, we wonder, what chance do our own glass and steel monuments have against the relentless grind of millennia? The lost expeditions are not just physical, but temporal. Every scholar who dies without reading that seal condemns the city to another generation of silence. Time flows over Konar Sandal like the river that once filled its canals, wearing down the sharp edges of history into rounded, unknowable forms. We are left staring into an abyss not of darkness, but of blinding, shifting sand, a granular screen upon which only fragments of the movie reel are projected. The very concept of lost implies a carelessness on the part of history. But perhaps Jiroft was never lost. It was simply ignored until it could no longer be denied. You feel it standing there, the awful fragility of knowledge, resting on the delicate thread of one unbroken seal, one clear stratum, one fire that baked the tablet hard enough to save it. The sand at your feet is an hourglass. Every grain that slips away takes with it the atomic structure of a timber roof, the pigment of a fresco, the DNA of a priest king. There is an existential grandeur in knowing that we will likely never hear the music they played, nor the lullabies they sang to children who played with clay figurines of those hybrid beasts. What we can do is listen to the silence and let it teach us humility. The realization that our global civilization is just the thinnest, most recent crust on a deep geological strata of human souls. The chlorite vessels will outlast the memories of all who currently debate them. Mute Green's stones that will sit in museum drawers until a future era, perhaps with wiser eyes, asks the right question. For now, the mystery of Jiroft remains a charged, electrified void, a hole in the archaeological map that crackles with the potential to rewrite the origins of urban man. We tell ourselves that time reveals all things, but as you look upon these ruins, you understand that time also devours, and it does not discriminate. The ziggurat is a sleeping giant. The earth around it is a sealed vault for which there is no known combination. If this journey into the unknown has captured your mind, stay with us as we continue to listen for the faint signals bleeding through the static of the past. The desert night falls over Jiroft. The stars emerge with a fierce, cold clarity, and the silence swells to fill the void left by a civilization that left no voice, only its soul carved in stone. And somewhere in that darkness, buried under a few feet of dust, lies the single word that would change everything. Still waiting, still forgotten, still dreaming.